Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about the Valley Grove Churches Tapestry project. Here is a distant view of the two Valley Grove churches on a hill in southern Minnesota, just a few miles from Northfield. This was my first glimpse of the churches on a gorgeous summer day in 2020. Here's a photo of the churches from the opposite direction, from the adjoining Oak Savannah Prairie. The church no longer has an active congregation. Like most rural areas, the population there dwindled in recent decades, and the congregation disbanded in 1975. The Valley Grove Preservation Society was founded to maintain the church buildings. The society also purchased 50 acres of land adjoining the churches and is restoring it to the native oak savanna landscape. Part of their mission is to bring the landscape back to the way it looked at the time the Norwegian settlers came there. As I start out, I want to thank my Valley Grove committee, Margaret Johnson, Marlene Halverson, and Gary Wagenbach. They supplied me with all the enthusiasm, stories, articles, and other documentation that has made this project so rewarding for me. You'll hear a few of Marlene's stories. And perhaps best of all, since I'm inexperienced in weaving commissioned projects, they have trusted me and my judgment along the way. I also appreciate all of my project fans, which include all of you here tonight. And just because I've always wanted to include a video in my in a presentation, this is a video of the trails behind the church on a beautiful fall day last year. So I never seek commissions, but now I'm immersed in a year's worth of work on 4 Valley Grove tapestries through a grant from the Preserving Nordic American Churches Project, which is in turn funded by a national nonprofit, the Fund for Sacred Places. More than 2 million Scandinavian immigrants settled in the Midwest, and the churches they built are important community assets. With shrinking rural populations, many of the older churches are at risk. The Nordic Churches Preservation Project maintains a database of Nordic American heritage churches and provides grants to help preserve the churches and sustain their presence in the community. The current round of funding from the Nordic Churches Project is to commission new works of folk art to elevate Nordic folk traditions and create wide community appeal. 6 churches or nonprofit groups received grants for projects in a variety of folk art types. This project focuses on Norwegian tapestry. Other folk art forms include traditional Norwegian rose painting or rose mauling, wood carving, Swedish folk painting, and Norwegian hardanger embroidery. The piece I want to see most was commissioned for Halsen Icelandic Church in Icelandic State Park near Cavalier, North Dakota. Bob Paulson is carving a baptismal font in the shape of a traditional Norwegian rooster ale bowl. So that's definitely a road trip for me to see the Norwegian rooster ale bowl baptismal font. This grant round ends in May, so you can check the Nordic Churches website for information on the completed projects. So here's one of the churches. The Valley Grove Wooden Church was built in 1894 after the congregation outgrew the original stone church beside it. The original stone church was begun in 1862. It has a limestone facing. This may be the only photo of the interior of the stone church when it was still in use, sometime in the 1800s. Note the wooden arch at the front of the church, because you'll see it again. The beautiful restoration that's already been done includes reproductions of the original sconces. And they were able to figure out how to make them because they found pieces of the original ones in surrounding farms, which I thought was fun. The interior is very spare and light. Looking toward the former altar area is a sliding door opening to the kitchen. You can imagine how many church dinners have been served there in the last century. I met with the project committee on a beautiful fall day in 2020, and we hashed out our ideas for the grant proposal. we decided that a tapestry would have the most impact in the small stone church rather than the larger white wooden church. The stone church has a space on a very personal scale. You could walk right up to the tapestries and examine them. There was a wall at one end of the church that would accommodate a large tapestry, but we decided there would be more impact with 4 smaller tapestries, 2 on each side under the sconces. Here I am holding up another of my tapestries in Norwegian tapestry style. Because this art was going to be created for the space, we took butcher paper and tried different sizes and switched out our templates between portrait and landscape until we were satisfied we had the best size and orientation. We learned in April 2021 that our grant submission was successful. When completed, the 4 tapestries will hang in the historic stone church in the summer months and be available for display in other venues each winter. So then I had to get going. My first step was to start designing the 4 pieces. It was the first of many times that I said to myself, what was I thinking? It would have been much easier, both for designing and weaving, to weave one very large tapestry. I set up extra card tables in my studio so I could work on all 4 at once. My intention with the project is to represent the plants and animals of the area, the immigrants who founded the church, and the churches themselves. But where would the animals go? Which animals, which birds, which people? It was a giant puzzle, and my solutions changed many times along the way. I want to mention a bit about historical Norwegian tapestry and how these modern tapestries follow in the tradition. To start, all the threads on the back of the older Norwegian tapestries were sewn in so that the back is as beautiful as the front. This is a time-consuming task. I've already been working on this tapestry for a few hours, and there are many hours to go. And that little pile of threads on the edge, that represents about an hour and a half of TV watching. The weft threads in Norwegian tapestry are wound into small bundles or butterflies. They don't use wooden bobbins. You can see the butterflies hanging down. And Norwegians often use ordinary forks rather than special beaters. I have a favorite Norwegian fish fork with just the right heft and weight. Historical Norwegian tapestries typically have areas of clean color with little shading or hachure. Outlining is common of the various shapes. I used outlining too, but not all the time, partly to save time. There are 4 tapestries, and mostly because of the scale of the pieces. For example, I don't think I could have outlined this chicken well. And many of my small plant pieces are not outlined. Outlining is often used to emphasize a shape. I'm careful to pay attention to color and value contrasts to ensure that the shapes are clear in my tapestries. In the European weaving tradition, when you weave a vertical line between 2 colors and a slit is created, you sew it up afterwards. In Norwegian tradition, decorative joins are used, so there are no slits. This might have been because Norwegian tapestries were often used as coverlets, and using the joining techniques creates a stronger fabric. So my tapestries have no slits. I also love the graphic and precise look that the joins create. Here you can see small dovetailed, square dovetailed joins on the trunk of the tree, which was woven vertically. You can see those same joins in the church steeple and the star in the second photo. I hope you can see those closely enough, and along the hem of a dress in the third picture. Historical tapestries used the yarn of Norwegian spælsow sheep. The fleece of these sheep have very long guard hairs, which allows the spinning of yarn with a hard and almost lustrous finish. In contrast, a French tapestry might have a sort of a fuzzier face. I'm using Norwegian wool yarn for the weft in my tapestries, a combination of Rauma prydvev yarn and Frid tint vevgarn, or thin weaving yarn. The warp is 12/9 cotton seine twine set at 10 ends per inch. I took my inspiration from old tapestries. I knew right off that I wanted to weave a border with animals. There are several historical Norwegian tapestries that have fantastical animals in a frieze around a central image, like this tapestry featuring the three wise men. You can see the animals marching around this blue border. The two small images are wonderful animals from other tapestries. The animal border in my first tapestry includes wild animals that were important to the ecosystem surrounding the churches and domesticated animals on the farms of the immigrants. My design method is a hybrid of cut and paste and Photoshop sizing. Once I decided on which animals to include, I needed to size them and place them in the right spaces. I had to balance them out, figure out which ones are more easily woven up and down, or which ones were more easily woven on their sides. I had to balance out the light and dark contrast because you wouldn't want all the brown animals on one side or the black and white animals bunched together. I checked out all of my yarn bins to find a variety of animal shades. I made simplified animal sketches based on photos, or in this case, a plastic beaver. Then I used Photoshop to make them bigger or smaller until I got the right size. Here's the woven beaver. I think he might be my favorite animal in the whole border. During the time of Norwegian settlement and the church founding, jackrabbits were prevalent. They largely disappeared in the 20th century with more land devoted to pastures and farming. Marlene Halverson wrote that the very last jackrabbit she saw in the area was in the 1990s, and she was shocked to see it even then, bouncing along the side of a gravel road near their farm. This jackrabbit image was taken from an 1898 tapestry designed by the Norwegian artist Gerhard Munthe. Because restoration of the native oak savanna surrounding the Valley Grove churches is an important goal of the Valley Grove Preservation Society, the central image within the animal border is a bur oak. Bur oak trees tend to be solitary specimens scattered within the prairie landscape. You could also say that the tree in the tapestry is a tree of life image. There used to be a giant bur oak on the church grounds, a wide canopy for the graveyard during the whole life of the church. Its age was estimated above 200 years, perhaps 230. It could have germinated from an acorn in the time of George Washington. Unfortunately, this tree blew down in a windstorm in 2018. So this is my homage to the tree I never saw. My design process also includes a fair amount of sampling. I needed to know whether my oak tree design would transfer nicely to the loom, so I wove a small square. It turned out great, and it was instructional in that I learned the blue background I chose would be too close in value to the tree, and I changed it to off-white. I also needed to sample a star for the four corners to figure out how many warp threads should fall between the points of the star. Here are the woven stars in the bottom of the oak tree tapestry. These tapestries are filled with images and stories from historical sources, from people with ties to the church, and naturalists. Marlene Halverson on my Valley Grove committee related stories from her father. He remembered riding in a horse-drawn wagon in the early part of the 1900s. He wrote, "When we would go out at night or were coming home or going to church, the brush wolves would follow the sleighs and eat the manure. There were timber wolves here too. Harsteads who lived about a mile south of here used to stack their hay down in the slough. The timber wolves would come there and sleep on the haystacks." This was my coyote sketch. And here's the woven coyote. Some people get lots of likes on Instagram for glamorous selfies in fancy restaurants or resorts. On my feed, the woven animals became social media stars, where 724 people liked the brush wolf on Instagram. But the pocket gopher won hands down with over 1,000 likes. The fox will hang on the Valley Grove wall, but he's already appreciated on the other side of the world. Shortly after I posted this photo, I started to get many new followers every day with names in Persian script. One woman wrote in English that my weaving was lovely and I should watch out because someone was posting my work without attribution. She sent me the site of an Iranian rug dealer who was actually taking orders for fox rugs. Here's a snapshot of his Instagram posts showing the fox among the other rug patterns that you could order. Over 100 people had commented on the rug dealer's post of my fox. I was more curious than miffed, so I wrote the dealer asking him that if he wove a fox rug with my image, could I get one too in exchange for using my pattern? I didn't think I would ever hear back from him, but I did, and it was a funny note, largely due to automatic translation. He wrote, "Hello, dear. I am Tehran, the administrator of the Keelam weaving page of my kindergarten page. I apologize for coming and putting the cartoon photo in my pajamas without your permission. I got the suggestion of weaving this work from several people, but because there was no weaver around me who could weave as clean and beautiful as you, I rejected it. What is the price you suggest for the texture of this beautiful work and how to pay through digital currency?" My husband suggested that I ask for a few Bitcoins, but I wrote and said that it was not for sale. The Tapestry project came at an opportune time to coordinate with another Valley Grove project. Minnesota filmmaker Paul Krause has been working for about 2 years on a documentary about the history of the Valley Grove Preservation Society. When he heard about the tapestries, he said he would wait to finish his film until one of them could be included. He came to my studio to interview me and film the tapestry on the loom, and when it was finished, I tacked up the hems of the oak tree tapestry and we put it up temporarily so he could take a photo. So there you can see it in place. I can only hope that other visitors to the church will be as appreciative as Paul was. He was excited to tell me about the final title he came up for his film, Valley Grove, A Living Tapestry. Paul's film is now done. It will be shown this Friday at the Carleton College White Center for Creativity and will be shown on Minnesota Public Television in the near future. So now we're moving on to the second tapestry. The women of the Ladies' Aid at Valley Grove were instrumental in saving the original stone church. They raised the money needed to refurbish it as a meeting hall. I looked through Valley Grove archival photos from the digital collection at St. Olaf College to find a suitable lady for my subject. This group was meeting at the home of Haldor Hope and were knitting items for soldiers during World War I. The lady I chose on the left-hand side of this photo reminds me a bit of my own grandmother, who belonged to a similar ladies' aid group in northern Minnesota. I enlarged the photo of my lady and made a simplified weavable sketch. And here's the woven lady. She looks a bit stern with her straight line mouth, but it's hard to create a smile over just a few warp threads. My friend Margaret Johnson said, she looks a bit perplexed, but then those were perplexing times. A rooster weather vane graced the original church in the 1800s, but by 1905, the original steeple was removed. When the Valley Grove Preservation Society replaced the long-gone weather vane, they followed a 19th century pencil drawing found on an old board. Can you see it there? to guide construction of the original. John Makastad used the old sketch to guide his design of the rooster replacement. Here's the steeple of the stone church and my woven steeple with the rooster weather vane. I think it is the magic of tapestry that just a few turns of thread around some warps can actually look like a rooster. But of course, that's what we're expecting, and that's what we're looking for. There's more rooster appreciation on the stone church tapestry. I based the bottom border on the ribbon-like border of the Norwegian Baldachol tapestry, which is from around 1170. The rooster replaces part of the ribbon design. So up here is the original Baldachol tapestry, and you can see that border on the bottom. That's a piece of it. And here you can see that I included the ribbon design and then substituted roosters along the way. And do you remember the Three Wise Men tapestry that I liked for its animal borders? I used some other graphic elements in the stone church tapestry too. I wove a plant similar to one in the old tapestry. My friend Kelly Marshall looked at it and said, "It's corn." That would be appropriate too, since corn is a common southern Minnesota crop. The old tapestry included 34 rectangles with a comb-like pattern in it. I didn't know the meaning of the symbol, so I asked my friend, the Norwegian author Annemor Sundbø. She thought they had religious significance and that the combs indicate that God is present and the weaving is holy. So that's appropriate. A person who saw my social media post about it said that he thought it was representative of a farm field. That's also appropriate. And my friend Kayla Exworthy also mentioned something appropriate. She said, it's a weaving heddle. The stone church tapestry also has a star and another plant from the old tapestry. When I began designing, I wasn't planning to weave words or titles. After all, they'll hang in the church, so the name would be somewhat redundant. I wasn't sure the churches themselves even needed to be depicted. But then I thought about the fact that the tapestries will be on display in other venues during the winter months, and then it seemed smart to weave both the churches and the name. People like to see looms, I think. So this is my Swedish Glimokra upright tapestry loom, and then me weaving on it. So now I'm working on the third tapestry with a skiing pastor. Pastor N.A. Quammen served Valley Grove Church for decades, from 1866 to 1908. Marlene Halverson told me this story. Her father told her about the pastor who skied from his home in Farmington to preach at the church. Pastor Quam stayed with various parishioners, including her father's grandparents. Marlene's father said that the pastor often arrived cold and crusted with snow, but undaunted by his journey. So you can see in my design, or the cartoon, which hangs behind the threads on the loom, that there's this arch. That's the arch from the church. He would have preached under that arch, so I guess that makes it extra appropriate. One of my design methods for these tapestries is to constantly look through images of the old tapestries. As I designed the skiing pastor tapestry, I saw this detail from a historical tapestry. I thought that the diamond pattern in the woman's dress, see this here, would work well for the snow. And there's the snow at the bottom of underneath the skiing pastor. And there are angels at the top of the tapestry, similar to a pair on a historical Norwegian tapestry. So you see these guys up here with the green wings. They will be at the top of the skiing pastor tapestry. So here's my progress so far. He's still headless, but I'm almost there. I hoped to have the stars in the sky above the pastor done before this talk, but it didn't work out. But these are the kinds of stars that I'll be weaving any minute now. My friend wrote recently that the pastor looked jaunty, and I suppose that's true. He has red mittens and a red scarf, and that might be unlikely. But the historical Norwegian tapestries had fantastical color too, like this blue horse. So the final tapestry will feature the white wooden church that was built in 1893. There will be a picture of it on there. At least 12 of the old gravestones in the cemetery around the churches include this image of clasped hands. The gravestone on the left is from on the right is from 1863, only a year after the stone church was built. The clasped hands were a common 19th century image symbolizing loss, reunion in the afterlife, or eternal friendship. I made a small test tapestry of the hands. The final tapestry will also include birds, but I haven't finalized my sketch. So when I'm done, there will be a tapestry of animals in an oak tree, a tapestry with the stone church and Ladies' Aid member, a tapestry with the skiing pastor, and a tapestry with the wooden church, a gravestone image, and birds and plants. I realized early on that I would never be able to incorporate all the suggestions from the committee members or all of my own ideas. So in the end, all of the elements within the tapestries will have meaning, but not everything with meaning can make it into the tapestries. So the tapestries will be done by May, if it kills me. I hope that you will get an opportunity to see the tapestries at the Valley Grove Church or in another venue in the off seasons. You can check the Valley Grove website at valleygrovemn.org for public events. The first time the tapestries will be shown is at a Syttende Mai open house on May 15th. Syttende Mai is Norway's Constitution Day and national holiday. There will be Hardanger fiddlers, and I'll be demonstrating tapestry weaving too. Valley Grove also has a super fun country social each year, and that will be on September 18th. The church is not open on a regular basis, but I'm sure another viewing could be arranged. During the winter season, when the unheated stone church is not used, the tapestries will be stored in a custom traveling case and made available for display in community spaces, including historical societies, libraries, museums, and galleries. They'll be accompanied by signage about the tradition of Norwegian Billedvev tapestry weaving and the stories behind these 4 tapestries and the Valley Grove churches. The first roadshow will be an exhibit at the Nordic Center in Duluth this fall from September 30th to October 30th. That exhibit will also include a lot of my preparatory materials and some of my other weaving too. As we schedule other venues, they'll be listed on the Valley Grove website and on my social media too, I'm sure. On this slide, you can see my contact information and the websites for Valley Grove and the Nordic American Churches Preservation Project. I know one thing that some people do is take a snapshot of a screen if you want to get those down now. So that is a brief view of the progress on the tapestry project, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Robbie, that was so wonderful. Thank you for sharing with us, as it's still in progress. It's amazing what you've accomplished thus far. And I'm sure you're going to have lots of places that are going to want to see this wonderful work and share it with a lot of communities. We have a few questions here, and I want to encourage other people to please put your questions into the Q&A, and we'll do our best to field them. The first one comes from Kathleen, and she's wondering, Did you work on 4 looms and do them all at once? And perhaps you answered that through the process, but will you talk a little bit about maybe, your design? Do you get all the designs done and then move to the loom and do them one at a time?
Well, that was the intent. And in the summer, in last May, when I started doing the designing and, in with other projects and responsibilities, and it became early summer, I realized that if I waited to have 4 perfect cartoons, I would never finish in time. Plus, I was really eager to get to the loom. So I had one, when I started, I had one completely done. I had one 95% done. I had the third one 60% done, and the fourth one less than 50% done, but very conceptualized. And then things did change along the way. I have them all warped on my loom, so I'm doing them successively. But one interesting thing is that if you are a tapestry weaver, you know that you have to look at your design and decide whether you could get the most lovely curves weaving it vertically or weaving it on its side. So the first tapestry I wove vertically, the one with the oak tree and the animal borders, that was woven vertically. And the next one was woven on its side, the one that you see on the screen in front of you, the piece of it on the screen in front of you. So then the tapestries are about 21 by 29 inches. So then I had to take away some of the warp threads on the side and weave it vertically in the second one. And now the third one is being woven. I wove the second one horizontally, the third one's being woven vertically.
Thank you.
Kristen has asked, what other motifs did you consider that did not end up in the final design? It's hard to leave things on the cutting room floor, but as you were making the choices, what would you have loved to include but didn't get to?
Mm-hmm. Well, do people know that the 13-lined ground squirrel, the kind of gopher that has stripes? I love those. They're so cute. And but Marlene Halverson said to me really that the pocket gopher was much more appropriate because it's important to the ecology. The burrowing of the pocket gopher in the prairies loosens the soil and makes it appropriate for the native wildflowers and so on. So even though I thought the pocket gopher wasn't as cute as the other, and I wasn't going to include 2 gophers. So the pocket gopher got on there. And then people just loved they're really kind of ugly in real life. They're kind of, creep. I don't know. They're not so cute. But the woven one ended up kind of cute. And then birds. I do have a number of bird sketches and wildflower sketches, and those are going to go into the final one with the white wooden church, but there's not room for all the sketches, so some of those are going to go away.
Thank you. So I don't know how if you like to reveal your tricks of the trade or not, so you can also choose to avoid the question, but Nan is wondering if you could explain how you made the diamonds on the skier's snow.
Well, you make the diamonds by weaving a triangle, and then you weave a triangle next to it, and then you make your outlining thread go, up and down. One side, it goes up and down one side, and I used 3 passes. So you go down one side of the triangle and then up the other side of the triangle, and then you fill that in. And then you weave the top of the triangle, and then you do the outline. So it's pretty easy if you are just weaving plain full diamonds. They get trickier when you have to cut it off because the ski is there, and then try to match it so that it's the outline is going at the same angle. So it does get tricky. I hope that makes sense.
That's wonderful.
So there are two questions about the actual fibers that you're using. Linda's asking if you would please tell us again the type of yarn you used for the weavings. And then Mary is asking if fading will be a concern. She loves all of the colors in the tapestries and is wondering about if fading will be a concern. So two yarn questions.
Yes, well, the yarn that I'm using is are two types of Norwegian yarn. One is from Rauma, Billedvev garn, which I think, I don't know, I guess you could describe it as a 2-thread sport weight. And the Rauma Norwegian yarn I order from the name, no, I'm blanking on the name of the shop in Decorah.
Blue hair.
Blue Heron Knittery.
The Blue Heron Knittery, and Sarah is great, and she will just mail that out in a blink. So I use that. Now the Fried Tint Wevegarn, or the thin weaving yarn from Fried, is from Norsk Fjord Fiber, and you can also order that online. And the weights are so similar that you can use them interchangeably, and they both include the spelsow wool. I think that the Rauma yarn is all spelsow and the Fried is mostly spelsow. So it gets that nice hard finish that with the nice bright, deep saturated colors. Fading is always a consideration, but I think in this case that the Norwegian yarns are of such fine quality that they are, they're not going to fade as much as some yarn might fade. But also they're going to be in the church for only the summer months, and then they'll be off the walls, and then they'll be displayed for shorter periods of time in other venues. So I think given the quality of the yarn, that I don't consider fading a huge issue for many years. They'll way outlive me, I'm sure. So.
Thank you. Karen is asking if you can again repeat when and where the film about this project and the churches is going to be shown.
It's this Friday. So it's this Friday it's in the Carleton College. I don't remember, White's Center for Creativity, I think was the name of it. That's the first time. And then they've sold it to TPT, to Minnesota Public Television. And so it will be shown a number of times in the next 3 years, but the first time hasn't been scheduled yet. But this Friday at Carleton.
Wonderful. Another question that has come in is asking about, it looks like some of the colors from one tapestry appear in another. Will you talk about how you thought about the colors that you were going to use, and how you kept the set of 4 as a unified set, but also reflected them as 4 individual pieces?
Absolutely. I mean, that's something I should have mentioned, because that definitely was one of my plans from the beginning, that even though these tapestries would have very different images, because a big oak tree is very different than a church and a skiing pastor, but I've kept the basic palette the same. So there's the same blue and the same red for sure in all of them. And then I have, 2 or 3 green shades that I use in the various tapestries, and the off-white and the grays. And then sometimes I'll introduce, there is this sort of dark navy, more of a navy blue in this, the one that's in front of you, and that's not in the skiing pastor one. But I wanted the people who walk into the church, and your first impression will be this spare light area and the beautiful sconces, and then underneath there'll be, this spots of intense color that you can walk up to, and they all will share the same palette. So that should unify them, even if the designs are quite different.
Andrew, do we have time for another question or two? Okay.
Absolutely.
So again, there's another question about yarn. I love our enthusiastic weaving audience. They want to get some details. So Dorothy's wondering about the weight of the cotton yarn you used for the warp.
I use 12/9 seine twine, which is kind of a standard tapestry weight at 10 ends per inch.
And then there was also a question about the final sizes of the tapestries. I believe you said 22 by 29. Is that correct?
Or about, yeah, 21 by 29.
21 by 29. Thank you.
Another question that has come in is, what comes next for you when this is done? Like, what things have you put on hold to work on this project?
Well, one thing that I am going to do is I studied the wool transparency technique of Frida Hansen when I went to Norway in 2019. Thank God that happened before the pandemic. So I had that opportunity. But I'm teaching a class, just a half-day class on designing for that technique at Convergence at the end of July. So I have to finish these tapestries because I have to prepare for that. But I have thought all along when I'm doing these tapestries, at the Weavers Guild, there are many interest groups, including our Scandinavian Weavers interest group, and they do group projects and you can participate in them. And I love doing that, but I haven't had time to sort of do anything else. So my thought is, after doing this tapestry that's intricate and challenging, I just want to do a rag rug. A simple rag rug, something that gets done quickly.
That's fantastic. So Linda has a question. She says, not being a weaver, she's curious how you finish the edges and if there's any kind of backing.
Yes. Oh, thank you for that question, because I didn't address this really interesting part of the project. So when we wrote the grant, the first finishing thing is you have to sew in all those tuck in all the ends, which takes forever. And then it's a sort of a braided finish on the edge that turns over the threads, and then they're actually hemmed. There's about an inch hem that's turned back. But then they are going to be given to Beth McLaughlin, who is a textile conservator and a weaver. And she is going to do the finishing to conservation standards. And so she'll do the hanging device, and they will be fully lined, or there will be a hanging lining, because the members of the committee were concerned that they will last for a long time. So I don't have to do the hanging device part of it, which is great. So Beth is going to do that finishing work, the lining and the hanging device. And then she's going to construct a special box for them to travel in and to be stored in the winter months. And so we plan to have a box that will include the 4 tapestries, probably lying flat, and then include perhaps 4 large rigid signs with photos of the church and descriptions of Norwegian tapestry and a bit about the project. So that would all be a nice set that could go to other venues.
Anne is wondering, we only have time for another question or two, but Anne is wondering, how much time do you spend weaving a day, weaving and designing?
Right about now, I spend maybe, I don't know, it's only like 3 hours actually weaving, I can't walk by it. It's in an upstairs studio, on the way to my bedroom. So I kind of can't walk by it without sitting down and throwing a few shots, and then you get roped into it. But I think my hands wouldn't be able to do any more than like 3 hours a day. And then of course there's more time. I've been watching some TV and working in the ends, and I still am designing and finalizing the pattern for the last one and writing about it also.
That's my final question, was about, I mean, you're also always writing and contributing to, through your own, the Norwegian textile letter, which is so wonderful, and also other publications. Do you have a plan for a writing project related to this work?
Well, maybe, I'm not sure. I am so focused on just getting the weaving done. And part of my purpose in just doing many blog entries is that they'll serve as something that we can go back to and shorten and make a booklet or a book. And Margaret Johnson, who's on the committee, said, and then we haven't even thought about t-shirts and mugs and everything about it. So who knows, there may be product related to the Valley Grove tapestries too. So, but we haven't figured out whether we're going to do a book or a booklet or something, but we will write about it. Mm-hmm.
You'll have to crowdsource the animal. Like, what do you want on the t-shirt and the mug? Vote for your favorite animal, right?
That's right. Or I guess you could order the animal you want. So.
Right.